Welcome to Earth Mysteries and another in the Fascinating Mysteries series. We're going to look at some walls and we're going to see how ancient these walls are and how they are found around the world. Very similar styles. So let's go. You may have watched my video on polygonal walls. And a polygonal wall is made up of multi-sided or multi-angled stones, as you see here. They have this sort of pillow effect, mainly because over thousands of years the stones become compressed, and hence you have this appearance. Now, the main feature of this is that nobody's been able to discover how these stones stay together, because there's no evidence of any mortar or clay that we would use today. Here's a wonderful 12-sided stone that you see in the streets of Cusco, and many people stop and take pictures because, wow, how many sides are there? And this picture must appear many times. Now you'll see in the stones above and even on this stone there are what we're going to call protrusions, and we're going to talk about those. But here also you see this amazing curved corner in Sacsayhuaman outside Cusco. And here they are saying, how did they create that? How did they create a curve in a stone when there doesn't appear to be any technological way, a saw or anything else, of actually shaping these stones? So how do they fit them together so well? And as everybody always talks about, you can't slip a piece of paper between the stones. So it's been suggested that maybe they used heat, or maybe some sort of plant fluid that stuck them together, or it's been suggested that some other sort of electrical energy is being used, because if you look at the meeting place of the two stones, those places where the stones meet, has somehow the stone has melted due to very high temperatures. So maybe they use very high temperatures to stick them together, but who knows, because we don't have that technology now. And how are they lifted? So many of these stones are 25 to 200 tons of andesite, very heavy. It's no different from Stonehenge or other sites. How did they get them on top of each other? And different ideas have been used, including this cyclopean giant. And we do know that giants were on this earth many thousands of years ago. And the Cyclops is having that eye in the center of his forehead. So maybe he used his intention of that through that one eye, used sound, and he lifted the stones to where they are. Good theory. And many of the Inca teachers talk about these stones being much lighter thousands of years ago. Okay, but because it's inorganic material, we really don't know how long ago these walls were created. And as I mentioned, this idea of these protrusions, you see that on these stones here, and nobody really knows why they're there. Again, if you were building this wonderful wall that you want to survive, maybe you would sand down those protrusions or get rid of them, but maybe they're there for a purpose, and it's thought that this is like a node or a fulcrum, an energy node, so it kind of gathers the energy in and then disperses it amongst the wall. Also, it's been suggested they have something to do with sound and vibration. So if you're holding on to these nodes, it feels as if different sounds, different tones will change the energy passing through the whole wall. And then there are these wonderful tiny pieces, what we could call keystones, which are fitting beautifully into the wall. Again, how did they design this? How did they manufacture this stone so it was absolutely correct for the stones that it's joining? Here we have it in Easter Island and the Assyrian in Egypt. And then another idea is, well, do the stones matter? And many of the stones that are found in these walls are made of granite or have a very strong crystalline structure. So we know that crystals store knowledge. That's why we see them in a computer. Is that what was stored in these walls? Are they just libraries of information? And certainly when I was at Angkor Wat in Cambodia, there was a place there that they had designed, or they had said, okay, this is a library. I shouldn't say design, they put it on their map as, oh, this was a library. But when you went in, of course, there was no evidence of any shelves or books there. But it also sensed that there was never any shelves or books. This sort of library was a library of stone, and you could feel that all the stones contained information. And so I suppose the bigger question is, how do you get that information out? Interesting, these windows in the Coricancha in Cusco are trapezoid. Larger at the base, smaller at the top. Very similar to the passageways in Angkor Wat. If you haven't seen that video, please do go to my Earth Mysteries file and you'll find it there. This particular design seems to be really important for sending energy. Again, I have never found anybody who could just tell me why trapezoid was important, but I found it all over the world. So here we have Sacsayhuaman, which a beautiful layout on the top of which is a medicine wheel, beautiful medicine wheel. It's hard to get to that nowadays. And other stones on top that were very much used to balance energy. Nobody knows how old Sacsayhuaman is. Again, you tend to find organic material which you can measure, carbon date, but you can't carbon date stone. And it's also very clear that many a time across the world, temples were built on temples were built on temples. And there's no evidence that the Inca built this at all. And in fact, the Incas, who were in AD, say, we didn't build this. We just came along and found it here. So I think that when we say this is an Inca structure, even the Incas would say they didn't build it. So somewhere between 10 to 50,000 years old. And it's often described as Lemurian or even Atlantean because of this length of period. And you'll see the sort of wall is more serpentine, and it's said to be, this is more like a serpent or a dragon energy that they were designing, but also the understanding that serpent energies have this way of bringing earth energies to the surface that, as I'll speak about, is quite relevant. Dr. Derek Cunningham suggested that the angles of the stones in Sacsayhuaman represent a numerical or mathematical value that resonates with the vibrational, the movements of the earth, sun, moon, etc. Sounds good to me. Definitely, there's something about the vibration, the size, the shape that is important. It feels as if sound could travel along here, but also the sound of consciousness. And so where do we find such walls? Well, here we are in the Assyrian at Abydos in Egypt. You could perhaps see these small protrusions again. Interesting that they're there. Why would they put them there? Or why not just, as I say, sand it down? You find it here in the causeway of the Giza Plateau, which I'll show you another place. You can see right at the back, maybe the Sphinx. You might say, well, yeah, they laid some stones down, but these stones are polygonal. They are not direct, as we might do, just having paving stones all the same size. Did the size matter? And underneath this causeway is the Osiris shaft, a huge catacomb of different passageways between the Sphinx and the central or the second pyramid. Very important. Was this a causeway or was it a roof? And I'll show you something else that's similar. Again, the Valley Temple in Giza Plateau, much older than a lot of the other structures. Maybe not as old as the Sphinx, but maybe older than the pyramids, because it was built in this way with polygonal stones. Here we are in the Apollo Temple in Delphi in Greece, and as I described in a previous Fascinating Mysteries video, a polygonal wall, but this wall was there long before the Greeks came along and put their temple on top. And in fact, as I described, there's a story that I was told by a man who said he remembered being a child and being found floating on top or sitting on top of some water that had collected on this wall. It made me very much aware that this might be an anti-gravitational device, and the ability to lift him off the water, allow him to sit on top of it, had some part to play with that. Was it something that allowed the electrical energy or the electromagnetic energy to be in a certain place to allow anti-gravitational vehicles or movement? Here you see it in the Ise Shrine, the famous Shinto shrine in Japan. This is a wall, but is very much a polygonal wall, and unfortunately when you go to the shrine, most people are focusing on the temples and not particularly on this shrine. Then we go to Easter Island, once again polygonal. This is a kind of a platform rather than a wall, and it's been suggested that this might have been a landing platform for UFO vehicles. Again, coming back to sort of an anti-gravitational experience. Many of these sacred sites with polygonal walls are believed to be the navels or the omphalos of the world, maybe interdimensional doorways into the center of the world. And they are specifically found where there are plates of the earth that rise or run over each other. So very prone to earthquakes. Delphi, Easter Island, Cusco. This would suggest that there could be an entry point into the center of Mother Earth and also an entry point out into the universe. Maybe these walls had something to do with that sense of being an interdimensional doorway. Now we move to a different part of the world. We move to New Zealand, the Kaimanawa Wall. Again, I created a video for this and it's had many comments on it. I love those comments. And whenever you go here, you see what you've just been looking at and you go, okay, this is another polygonal wall made by somebody in the past. But it is said to be, no, this is natural. There's nothing unnatural about this. This is a typical way that such a wall would be developed, and move on. Stop looking. And so this is just seen as a normal outcropping formed hundreds of thousands of years ago. So please don't dig here, don't come here. But you might see in this image, you could say, well, okay, this is very precise. It's somewhat similar to what Christine's been showing me up to now. And then you see this, which is actually behind the wall, and it looks very much like that causeway I showed you in the Giza Plateau. And you think, okay, what is this perhaps not just being a walkway, but what is it where it's a roof? And you might see at the back there that someone actually has dug into it and found that there is a chamber, or there are chambers and maybe even passageways underneath this particular causeway or path. Is it similar to what we saw in the Giza Plateau? Is it very ancient, or is it, as they wanted us to know, is just natural? And if we're going to look at the supernatural, we've got to go to Montana. Now, Montana has this giant 75 million year boulder batholith of North America. And this means that all this granite was thrown up into the air and then has settled, and it's crystalline and it's got magnetite in it, so strong magnet energy. And different thoughts here. Some call it the giant's playground, and they say this, could not have developed on its own, even if I turn it on its side. So the picture on the left, you can see that there are several boulders involved, and there's a passageway. Could that have just been made? Remember, this is granite, so even that archway wouldn't have been worn away like it could have done if it was limestone or sandstone. Is that natural, or was it designed? Similarly, we have this image where this is the pink granite. Again, where did that come from, and how did it find its way to just be nicely nestled between these other granite stones? Again, people want to say, or it is said, archaeologists want to say it's just natural. And from my experience of going there, there is this amazing rock here that you can't actually get onto because of the trees. But I call this the generator of energy, the mother generator. because the energy coming out of it is so strong. And it's not possible to see this, but all the trees and the bushes literally are leaning into this energy source. And I found that this is very true. Sometimes you see spiraling of the tree trunk or spiraling of the branches where there's a strong energy force. My other impression when I was here was that these stones, and these stone particular, the ones I'm showing now, are actually stone people, stone beings. And you can take that as you like. But I believe that there is intelligence and consciousness within these stones. And that what I was listening to as I was speaking to stones, that these stones are asleep. They're waiting. They were waiting for an opportunity to wake up. And that they've been in place for a long time. And now we go to Tiza, which is a part of this grand area in Montana. And once again, you've got to say, okay, so this was just a natural formation of a piece of granite that just happened to actually have this form, have a centerpiece. And to me, this was very much lined up to like a tuning fork. And it lined up beautifully to the true north on the compass, which points to the pole star. And I felt that there was something really important about the wind passing through this, because we are way high up now, and the wind passing through this gap and somehow connecting to the pole star. Just my imagination, if you want. So here you're seeing it from below, and you can see, I mean, it is a magnificent stone. And you can also see it is balancing. And here is what it's balancing on. Nobody's put that there. Nobody's made that happen. And then you have, just to finish off, these protrusions. And some of them, if you look at their faces, are actually like little faces, I have to accept. So this is a second part of this Montana energy I wanted to show you. And here the third one, Sage Mountain in Montana. Little distance from what I've just been showing you. But if you didn't know better, you'd say this is a Lemurian wall, a wall-made, man-made wall, polygonal wall. And there's huge debates as to whether or not this is ancient, modern, natural, not natural. I've been around it. It's got a lot of energy in it, and it goes for quite a distance. In fact, I spoke to the person who owns the land, and they said they didn't even know it was there when they bought the land. They just thought they were going to make a wonderful ecological place, which it is. But then they found the wall. And the wall is there, and I could take many pictures, but this is part of it. It's like, well, okay, is this just natural? Did someone say, okay, I know how to build a wall like this, let's build one? If it is there, it's been beautifully constructed. That's all I can say. And I believe it has been there for a long time. Although, again, I'm not going to put my money on it. But in the fact of the matter is, I can see that there was a design to this. And it is so beautiful and so much beautiful energy when you're with it. Here again, you can see certain rocks have been brought together to fit into this V shape. I wanted just to show you that. And I'm finishing off in Tiahuanaco in Bolivia. Yes, I've jumped across the many continents. Not particularly because this is a polygonal wall, although it is made up of many little stones, but because this particular wall was designed to actually allow the sun's shadow to pass across it. And archaeology wants to tell us that this is fairly modern, maybe, the time of the Incas. But if we look at the positioning of the sun, we see that actually the one time where this wall actually aligned to the positioning they wanted it to was 12,000 years ago. And it is such an old site. When I went there and I stood in this beautiful Gateway of the Sun portal made up of an andesite stone, pretty heavy, carried from over 60 kilometers away. It's clear that Tiahuanaco was not like anything else I'd seen. And yes, there are pictures. You may see this little man here, and this is said to be Wirikosha, but there are so many other symbols and images here on this particular gateway of the sun, which did get cracked, hence the crack in it, because again it's an earthquake zone. But it is said to be that this is another interdimensional doorway and is ancient. This may not be the real one that was originally here, but it does feel that it's trying to tell us something about the original people who were here when perhaps not just 12,000 years, 20,000 years ago, there was a civilization who knew how to build these walls, how to build these stones, and not only build them to make them significant for the lives we lead today. So the reason I share this is not to look back, but to say we are the ones that built these walls for the time that we're in today. Let us experience their energies and help them lift us to new heights. And that's where I'll stop for today. I hope you enjoyed our journey. And until next time, take care.